How do you go from decades of irrelevance to hoisting the Stanley Cup and turning your team into a modern dynasty? If you're the Florida Panthers, it takes one fearless GM, a bold blockbuster, and a team that refused to back down. This is how the Cats built a champion. Let's rewind. The Panthers entered the NHL in 1993 and made the Stanley Cup final just 3 years later in 1996. But after that, 2 whole decades of mostly misery. Between 1997 and 2020, Florida won just one playoff series. The franchise became a punchline, a warm-weather team with low attendance and no identity. Things started shifting in 2021. Led by Jonathan Huberdeau, Alexander Barkov, and Aaron Ekblad, the Panthers won the President's Trophy in 2022 with 122 points, the best season in franchise history. But then came the crash. They got bounced in the second round by Tampa, a sweep, humbling. The team looked like it hit its ceiling. So GM Bill Zito made a decision. That would change everything. That summer, Zito pulled the trigger on one of the most shocking trades in recent NHL history. Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar, both fan favorites, traded to Calgary for Matthew Tkachuk. Huberdeau was coming off a 115-point season and had been loyal to the Panthers, playing there for 10 seasons, while Weegar had a career year, scoring 8 goals, 44 points, and finishing top 10 in plus-minus. Critics saw it as a massive risk, but it was genius. Zito would hire their new head coach Paul Maurice after letting go of interim head coach Andrew Brunette following their 2022 playoff disappointment. In the 2022-23 season, Tkachuk put up a near MVP season with 109 points, finishing third in Hart Trophy voting. The team struggled. Bobrovsky faltered in goal. Florida barely hung on in the standings. Zito made some deadline moves, grabbing scoring winger Vladimir Tarasenko from Ottawa and longtime veteran Kyle Okposo. But the real savior was unexpected. Third-string goalie Alex Lyon. Florida squeaked into the playoffs on the final day of the regular season, led by Lyon's improbable hot streak. In round 1, they drew the 65-win Boston Bruins, the best regular season team in NHL history. After Lyon struggled through 3 games, Maurice turned back to Bobrovsky, who went nuclear. Florida stormed back from a 3-1 series deficit, capped off by Carter Verhaeghe's Game 7 overtime winner. Tkachuk became the identity of this team, a playoff wrecking ball with MVP upside. And in 2023, the Panthers rode him all the way to the Stanley Cup final. They lost in 5 to Vegas, but this wasn't a Cinderella run. It was a warning. Coming off that Cinderella Cup final run, the Panthers doubled down. Zito added depth too, bringing in shutdown defenseman Oliver Ekman-Larsson and two-way forwards like Evan Rodriguez and Kevin Stenlund, who gave Florida a relentless bottom 6. Bobrovsky rediscovered his Vezina-caliber form, and Maurice pushed all the right buttons behind the bench. This team wasn't sneaking into the playoffs anymore. They dominated. Florida finished top 3 in the league standings and rolled through the 2024 playoffs. They knocked out Tampa Bay in 5, survived a physical series against Boston in 6, and dismantled the Rangers in the conference final with suffocating forechecking and special teams mastery. In the final, a clash with the league's best, Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers. The Panthers jumped out to a 3-0 series lead, but Edmonton clawed back with 2 gritty wins. Game 6 was tense, nerve-wracking, but the real story? Game 7. After blowing a 3-0 series lead in front of a wild crowd in Sunrise, Sam Reinhart scored the game-winning goal in a 2-1 win as the Panthers lifted their first-ever Stanley Cup. No asterisks, no underdog tags. They earned every inch of it. What made this Panthers team special was their ability to adapt without tearing it all down. They didn't cling to nostalgia. They evolved. They replaced stars with stars. They made bold choices in free agency and didn't hesitate to promote from within. And despite dealing with injuries, aging players, they kept finding answers. From Anton Lundell and Eetu Luostarinen developing into dependable two-way forwards, to young depth like Maki Samoskevich getting meaningful reps. While losing key pieces to the defensive core in Brandon Montour and Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and depth forwards Tarasenko, Cousins, and Lomberg in free agency, they filled the holes with AJ Greer, Thomas Nosek, and veteran defenseman Nate Schmidt. And re-signing Game 7 hero Sam Reinhart, the Panthers entered the 2024-25 season reloaded and looking to repeat. And that they did, with an injury to Tkachuk at the Four Nations tournament and placing him on LTIR. Zito was able to use the available cap space at the trade deadline to load up for the 2025 playoffs by bringing in Seth Jones from the lowly Chicago Blackhawks and the last-minute deal snagging Brad Marchand from the rival Bruins. The Panthers were once again stacked heading into the playoffs as the third seed in the Atlantic Division. In the first round, they dismantled the revamped and favored Tampa Bay Lightning in 5 games. Crushed Maple Leafs fans' hearts coming back from down 2-0 and winning in blowout fashion in Game 7. Continued their dominance over Carolina in 5 games. Led by stellar play from Sam Bennett, Brad Marchand, and Sergei Bobrovsky, the Panthers were back in the finals, looking to repeat against the same team they played the previous year, the Edmonton Oilers, who were looking for their revenge. 3 of the first 4 games went to overtime, with a Brad Marchand masterclass in Game 2, including the double overtime winner. With the series tied at 2 apiece, the Panthers' suffocating defense, steady goaltending from Bobrovsky, and dominant performances from Bennett, Marchand, Barkov, and Reinhart sealed the next 2 games. And with it, their second straight Stanley Cup, cementing themselves as a modern-day dynasty in NHL history. Now that the Panthers have re-signed Conn Smythe winner Sam Bennett, Brad Marchand, and Aaron Ekblad, going into the 2025-26 season, they set their goals on the first three-peat in over 40 years, since the New York Islanders did it in 1982. In the span of just a few seasons, the Panthers went from forgotten franchise to President's Trophy winners, to Cup finalists, to back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. That's not a lucky streak. That's a dynasty in the making. They did it with guts. They did it with vision. And they did it while proving that market size doesn't define greatness, identity does. Their success wasn't built on a generational draft pick or a one-hit wonder. It was built on culture, on calculated risk, on belief, and that's how the Florida Panthers went from a franchise that once played to half-empty arenas to the blueprint for how you build a modern NHL champion. So hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know. Do you think the Panthers will three-peat next year? Are the Panthers a modern-day dynasty? And who do you think will be the next team to rise like Florida? Because in today's NHL, dynasties aren't born, they're built.